Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. This week, Carol visits a modern plant hunter who's amassed a vast collection of plants in his Scottish garden.
This 18th century walled garden in the heart of the Scottish borders is home to more than 4,000 different varieties of really special plants gathered together from all over the world.
And we visit a couple who've made their allotment into more than just a fine collection of fruit and veg. And it's become an entire garden.
Well, the allotment really is the centre of our life now. What else would two old retired layabouts be doing?
And I shall be cutting some of my taller hedges and also taking the tomato trial to the really important stage, which is tasting. Pop those in there just for a moment. In fact, the colour of this particular sweet pea is almost identical to this penstemon. This is penstemon blackbird, and you can see it's got that lovely purpley grape-ish hue. And one of the special things about penstemons at this time of year is they give you a huge range of colour, from the darkness of ones like blackbird to a pink like this one, which is McPenny's pink, a little raspberry touch to the inside. And that range of colour, flowering from July through to November, is really the power of penstemons that will go on. If you keep deadheading them, they'll just produce more and more flowers to the first frost. They come from North America. They're not particularly hardy, but they are very floriferous. I think there's no garden that can't find a home for some penstemons. Now, when you buy them, obviously you're going to look for the flower colour. And that's natural, and you go to a nursery or a garden centre and you see something like this and you say, yeah, that will work well. But just consider the plant itself. I've got another blackbird here, both bought from the same nursery, both the same price. Whereas this is a much better plant, even though it hasn't got a single flower on it. Partly because there's more of it, and partly because this is also going to give me lots of material for cuttings. And of course, the cutting you take now will give a plant this big next year, so very, very cheap. Get a potting compost mix and add something to lighten it. I've got some perlite here, but grit would do just as well. Then put some into a small pot. Now, at this point, you need sharp secateurs, and also, if you're old and blind like me, you need glasses. What we're looking for is fresh, new growth, and this is perfect here. So if I cut about 4 or 5 inches long, take that, and that's another good one there. Take that. These are shorter growth, but that doesn't matter. Perfect, and that's left plenty of material for planting out. So I haven't damaged the plant or weakened it in any way. With a cutting like that, you have a lot of foliage, and that's all losing moisture. And because it doesn't have any roots, it's not taking up any moisture, at least hardly any, from the base. So what you need to do is get a balance whereby it's not losing too much moisture, but it's also got enough leaves to feed it, and so it can stay alive. So what we need to do is just reduce some of these leaves, and these can just pull off or cut off with a knife. You don't want to damage the stem, so just take that off there. And in fact, I'm going to take off most of the leaves, leaving a bare stem, and I'm going to just push that down in the corner. It's also important to do it quickly. If you can't take the cutting inside a shed from the parent plant, always have a polythene bag to pop them into, because they're losing moisture by the second. Now I'm burying these about 2 or 3 inches down. In fact, I'm pushing them down to more or less the bottom of the pot. But essentially, you want at least an inch under the soil, and if it can be 2 inches, so much the better. These will take a few weeks to root, and you'll know they've rooted because you'll see new growth. And then you can either leave them in the pots, and they can spend the winter protected from the frost and be potted on in the spring, or if you've got a bit more space, as soon as they've rooted, put them into individual pots and then store them in a cold frame or a greenhouse where they're reliably frost-free, and they will grow next spring into nice big plants. Now this bed is getting pretty full, but I have got a little corner here which I can get one of these plants into at least. I've got two. So there's McPenny's Pink that I've taken my 5 cuttings from, and also Thorn, which is paler, more delicate, which I think I'll plant in another bed. So we'll put McPenny's Pink in there. It doesn't matter what colour your penstemon is or what species or variety, it will want drainage. They really do need good drainage. So unless you've got very light soil, then add some drainage to it. I am going to add a little bit of grit just to improve it. Won't do any harm at all. Dig that in the ground, and that will help not just the plant to grow in the conditions that it likes best, but particularly it'll help it over winter. What they hate is sitting in wet, cold soil. And here at Longmeadow, it's guaranteed to be wet and cold for months on end in winter. And then just pop it in the ground. And just, in you go. Now, other than watering it in once you've planted, there's really nothing else to do. Deadhead them as the flowers fade, and they will go on flowering right into autumn. Right, let's find a home for this. Now, I haven't taken cuttings from this yet, but if I plant it, let the roots establish, I'll get a new flush of growth, which will provide me really good cutting material by the end of September. Now, its home could be here amongst the borders, it could be amongst the vegetables. The whole point of this cottage garden that I'm creating, it's very much work in progress, is to get that mix. Let them all jumble in together, and as long as the feeling is right, it doesn't actually matter whether it's edible, floral, herbal, medicinal, it can all work in. And we went to visit a couple in North London who've taken the spirit of the cottage garden and applied it to their allotment.
We've only been here about 5 years, and we feel we've done a huge amount in that space of time. Well, we're partners, and the last 25 odd years, and we only started gardening together
when we came here.
Well, the allotment really is the centre of our life now. We enjoy the company of the other allotmenteers, and
we celebrate our family's birthdays and dinners, coffees, barbecues.
It's always great fun to come up and have the company, and what else would two old retired layabouts be doing? Keeps us very active and keeps us happy. We grow a huge range of fruit and veg, believe it or not. We have the usual things, cabbages and beans and onions and all the usual stuff that people grow. But we also like to experiment with things for fun. And our favourite, sharp-fin melon, because it's a real heavyweight thug. It runs all over the place when nothing else will, produces huge gourds and looks fantastic. And then the rose obsession began.
I beg your pardon. I never promised.
We're never going to get to James Galway, are we?
Along with the sunshine, there's gotta be a little rain sometime.
Well, we're both very interested in roses, and here was a great opportunity to grow the roses we wanted. Every rose smells of roses, but they all smell differently. The history of the rose is wonderful, the romance of the stories behind the roses is wonderful, and they're rather beautiful as well. So. We've got what we call an exotic border, and it's full of huge plants in a very big border, things like tetrapanax and paulownias. Well, we particularly like those because they're so different from everything else, and it gives a lovely, wild, exotic feel to the allotment.
We've done a pond for wildlife.
Well, I could tell you a story about the pond because I wasn't feeling too good one day, and I went home at lunchtime, and I came back the next day, and we had a pond. So I just dug one out while I was away. And he's very good at building stuff and things like that, which I'm rubbish at. So. But the nice thing about it is we both seem to have a project going at any given time, and we just get on with it and leave each other alone to do it. So we don't have too many arguments about what's what.
He tells me what to do, and I do it.
That is so unfair, but
It's
true.
so true.
No.
Young and beautiful, it's your duty to be beautiful. Keep young and beautiful. If you want to be loved, don't fail to do your stuff with a little part of
Tabulous, but that's disputed whether or not it's actually a species.
you want to be loved. Oop-a-doo.
Yeah, my man. All right.
Hedges are a really important part of this garden. When we came here, there were none. It was just a couple of small scrubby trees, and that was it. So to plant hedges was to create protection and to divide the garden up into spaces. And in fact, it's not that big a garden. It's just having lots of different spaces makes it seem much bigger.
I've framed views and created drama around the garden by contrasting low hedges with some very tall ones.
Oh, you're looking good, baby.
Now, it follows that tall hedges are more hedge cutting. But the principles of cutting a hedge is exactly the same, whether it's that tall or 30 foot tall. And with a tall hedge, the big thing to watch out for is that the top, which is going to grow faster because it gets more sunlight and because you prune it, therefore it will grow vigorously, will shade out the bottom. And you can very quickly and easily get bare patches in the bottom of the hedge. And the only way around that is to have a batter, and that means cutting it at a slope. So the taller the hedge, the more important is that it's wider at the bottom than the top. So that's the main thing to bear in mind. Right, let's get going.
Over 3,000 people per year are treated after accidents with hedge trimmers, so it's worth taking some trouble, particularly to protect your eyes. As you cut, work slowly forwards, going from the bottom upwards. And take your time.
It's worth just checking that you've got the batter and that the line is reasonably straight, because obviously you can't see it when you're close up. And just keep going back. Just go on until you're happy with it. And not until you've got the sides exactly right, you take the top off. But if you've got a cypress hedge, Lelandia, something like that, don't cut into old wood, because it won't regrow. So just leave a little bit of new growth.
All working now, one time. Too much, baby, all right.
Well, that's a start. And although hedge cutting is quite a big job, and if it's a big hedge, it's an even bigger one, but it's worth it. It looks good for nearly the whole year. Now, our gardens are full of plants from all over the world. That's the joy of them. But plant hunting is not something that used to happen in the past. Carol has been to meet a 21st century plant hunter and his incredible collection of plants.
When you step inside an ancient walled garden, you expect to be greeted by row upon row of carefully tended vegetables. You expect the high brick walls to be festooned in every imaginable exotic fruit. But not here. This 18th century walled garden in the heart of the Scottish borders is home to more than 4,000 different varieties of really special plants gathered together from all over the world. You usually think about plant hunters as being people from the past, but I've come to meet a modern-day plant hunter. Michael Wickenden has travelled the globe, visiting 5 continents and 15 different countries to discover new and exotic plants. And he's brought them here to Cali Gardens. So how on earth did you start plant hunting? Did you just sit there one day and think, oh, I'm going to go off?
Not quite. I'd been gardening and collecting plants and had already started the nursery. I'd sold some plants. I had some money at last. And the first thing I wanted to do was go and see the plants in the wild and perhaps collect some seed and get some new stuff. And the thing about plant hunting is that it takes you to places that no tourist is ever going to go near. I suppose it's travelling with a purpose, and that's the exciting thing.
And this is a dianthus, isn't it?
Yes, it is, Carol. It's Dianthus amurensis from the Russian Far East. That was collected on my trip to Vladivostok in 1996. It's a wonderful part of the world for plants because very, very hardy plants there. The sea freezes in the winter.
Did you know what it was going to be like?
No, I didn't. I knew it was a dianthus.
Yeah.
I didn't know what colour it was going to be, and it was great because it's a beautiful sort of luminous mauve, and it flowers after the other dianthus, pinks as people call them, have finished.
Yeah.
There it is, Dianthus amurensis Andrei. Andrei Goncharov was my Russian botanical guide on that trip. So
on your trip to Vladivostok?
Yes, so I named it after my guide because he was such a great chap. Just over here next door, this is a poppy called Papava trinifolium. There's the flowers.
How
rather
pretty.
Nice apricot flowers. Yeah. And I've been keeping this because I'm hoping that in here there will be the seed, and there it is.
Oh, look at that.
So out of
They're
those...
like little pepper pots, aren't they?
They are, yeah. Out of that, lots and lots of seed.
Wonderful.
And that's just what we do when we're plant hunting, and that goes into a paper bag and then back home. This is something that we collected in the eastern Himalayas, and this is a kind of buckwheat. And there's quite a lot to recommend it because it flowers like this from sometime in June right through to the autumn.
Beautiful background for this eryngium, isn't it? But I don't think I've seen this one before.
This is Eryngium serbicum from Serbia, and we got that in an exchange. Botanic gardens worldwide have a wonderful non-commercial seed exchange system. It's still going strong. It's a bit less than it used to be because of something called the Biodiversity Convention.
Since Michael first started plant hunting, the laws on collecting from the wild to breed new plants have become much more stringent. He feels strongly that one aspect of the Biodiversity Convention, the current legislation that governs modern-day plant hunting, means that anyone starting out today simply wouldn't be able to develop a garden like this one.
I just like the feeling of connectedness with the rest of the world through plants.
Because we are, aren't we?
We are. You know, someone said that the world is an inhabited garden.
Yes.
Which is a bit romantic, but I suppose you could see it that way.
I bet you agree with that, really, deep down.
Yes, yes. So here's a plant I wanted to show you, Carol. This is Paris polyphylla, and there's a direct connection here with one of my great plant hunting heroes, George Forrest, because he collected the first plant of this in 1915, and then he brought it to the Botanic Gardens in Edinburgh, and this is a seedling of it. So direct connection to 100 years ago and George Forrest.
And doesn't it look wonderful with this, Rogersia?
Well, this is a Rogersia that I collected in the Himalayas, perhaps not so far from where George Forrest was. And this is in fruit, actually.
What a beautiful planting idea.
Pure chance, like all the best combinations here.
Yeah, but two great plant hunters celebrated in its one combination.
One great plant hunter, and you're not great until you've died, remember?
Of course.
That's the important thing.
And please don't do that yet. Aspiring.
All right, not quite yet.
I love the way Michael puts plants together. It's a real inspiration to all gardeners. But the point is that he really sort of exemplifies that whole spirit of plant exploration, bringing all these plants together so that we can use them in our gardens.
Now, I've been doing an informal trial based upon an experience that I had last year of seeing tomatoes grown in terracotta pots with very little soil. I had quite a lot of response, actually, from you, because a number of you have also tried to grow tomatoes in a terracotta pot, half filled with soil, and in general, the reaction has been surprise and indeed delight that they've grown so well. But no one has yet reported on how they taste. Now, I've got 2 Gardener's Delight plants growing in a grow bag, 2 growing in what I call normal size plastic pots, and then 2 growing in much smaller terracotta pots, which are half full of the same compost. So let's go for taste. Now, obviously, this is subjective, but I promise to report accurately and faithfully what I taste. So, this is the grow bag. And by the way, you can see that these are large, healthy plants with a really good crop. It's a good tomato. It's well-flavoured, round. The skin is quite tough. And it's not a memorable tomato, but it's good. Right, well, let's go on to the way that I often grow them, which is a largish plastic pot. Very similar. No better, no worse. No difference between the two. Therefore, you have to say that if you're measuring just these 2, the grow bag wins hand down because there's more of them and the taste is just as good. So finally, we come to the terracotta pots, which have got far fewer tomatoes. I'm willing it on. I want it to be good. And it is good, but it's no better than the other 2. So I have to say that at this stage of the year, and there's another month at least of tomato harvest ahead, the grow bag is winning hands down, which is not the result I either expected or wanted, but that's the truth.
The tomato trial is my subjective, rather unscientific look at different methods of growing tomato plants in containers. In my old greenhouse, I'm still growing my main crop planted directly into the ground.
There's much more fruit, and we've been eating them all summer. And I can tell you the taste is better. It's fantastic. You've got a little bit more acidity that adds a depth to the sweetness. And there's more of a sort of growing aftertaste. Now, I don't quite know why that is, but certainly in my experience, to get the best from tomatoes, grow them in soil, in a bed, under cover. This is my asparagus bed, and it's giving me causes for concern. It's not doing terribly well. I planted it a couple of years ago in April 2011. I added lots of grit, dug the whole bed, and then planted the asparagus in a grid system. It really didn't establish very well. We had a few spears this year, but nothing much. And it's got nothing like the vigour that I would expect from an asparagus bed that is in its third year. Now, what I want to know is this a result of the bad weather we've had or something that's going wrong? Now, if you're not an asparagus grower, there's still lots you can do in the garden. And here are some jobs for you to be getting on with this weekend.
It's not uncommon for camellias and rhododendrons and azaleas to drop unopened buds in spring before flowering, and that's because they're too dry. So water them well now and for the next few months, especially if they're in pots. And then the buds will form properly and should guarantee a good display next year. Vine weevils can become a major problem for plants in pots. But if you apply nematodes now, it can help get rid of them. Adult vine weevils cause typical notches on leaves, but the real damage is done by the larvae that feed on the roots of the plants in autumn, winter and spring. Follow the instructions on the packet to dilute the nematode mix. Don't treat the plants with notch leaves, but water the nematodes into all pots where plants are living permanently, as it is here that the eggs are laid. As we come now to the end of August, the time left for tomato plants to form and ripen new fruit is diminishing. So it's a good idea to stop them or cut them off. Use a knife or secateurs and don't worry about losing some flowers or even a few fruit. The result will be that the plant will focus its energy into swelling and ripening the existing fruit.
There we are, another job done. And that's it for this week. Bye-bye. Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. Now, I know we're coming to the end of August and summer is disappearing, but September's coming. And I love September. It's one of my favourite months. You still have glorious weather, but cooler nights and that lovely light, which just makes everything seem as though it's lit from within. But here at Longmeadow, it is the driest month of the year. Because it's so dry here, we have to water, and this is the harvest season. We want to keep things going for as long as possible. But it is important to water wisely. Don't worry about brassica at this stage, or even root crops, but water plants like courgettes, or lettuce, or sweet corn, where the moisture will actively benefit the condition and quality of the harvest. And also, never sprinkle. Water in a jet, if possible, with a watering can or a hose pipe, at the roots. So all the water goes into the roots and then into the plant. And finally, if you can, water in the morning or the evening. This week, we meet a gardener in Derbyshire who's been growing and showing gladioli all his life.
The world of gladioli showing can get very competitive, but those rivals are some of my best friends.
And Carol is at Glebe Cottage, celebrating that late summer jewel, the crocosmia.
How could you resist growing something like that? Perfection.
I shall be taking cuttings from pelargoniums to make sure that I have a decent supply for next year. And also, I've come up with a solution to that age-old problem of dry shade. We tend to think of bulbs as something that belongs to spring. And in fact, we're soon coming up to the time when we'll have to be planting our spring bulbs. But there are autumn bulbs too. Now, I've got here a bag of bulbs of colchicums, which flower September time. This is Colchicum speciosum album. White flowers for the white garden, or writing garden. The meadow saffron, which is Colchicum autumnale, is our native colchicum. And thank you very much. The noise is off. And that grows in meadows, but tends to be eliminated because it's poisonous to stock. If those lambs ate this, they really would be very unwell indeed. In fact, after you've handled colchicums, wash your hands. Now, they're not a bulb at all. In fact, they're a corm, but really singular because they've got this tail or rudder at the base, and these are whoppers. Speciosum album is especially big, and it's a good plant because not only has it lovely white flowers, but it's robust. And one of the problems with colchicums is that they tend to be really bashed about by weather. But if you want just one that's a bit more robust, Colchicum speciosum album is a good one. What they really like is sunshine. They open out in the sun, so if you choose a site, whether it be grass or a border, make sure it does get plenty of sun. Now, here in the writing garden, the sun is very bright and it comes through. It's slightly shaded by these apples, but I'm going to give these a bit of a prune in winter. So if I plant these on this side, I think they should perform really well. Now, these corms are enormous, but they do need to be buried deeply. At least 4 inches above the top, and 6 inches is better. So you need a spade, not a trowel. And they're quite expensive, but not ridiculous. They're about £1.50 to £2 plus each one. Now, by planting these today, they will flower this autumn. So if you want to get some, get them in the ground quickly, and then you can enjoy them this year. The soil needs to be rich and quite moist. So although they like sun, they don't like very dry soil. So if you've got very dry, sandy soil, add some leaf mould or garden compost. But the cycle is very much a question of growth of foliage in spring and early summer. That dies back to nothing, and then the flowers emerge. And because the flowers emerge without any foliage, their old-fashioned name was naked ladies.
There was Adam, happy as a man could be, till Eve got him messing with that old apple tree. Ain't that just like a woman? Ain't that just like a woman? Yes, that's just like a woman. They'll do it every time.
So put the tail in the ground, acts as an anchor, and that will go on growing for years and years. With many bulbs, a cluster or a group often looks much better. But with these colchicums, you do need to give them room. I would allow at least 12 inches between them because they have fairly broad foliage.
Ain't that just like a woman? Ain't that just like a woman? Yes, that's just like a woman. They'll do it every time.
No, I think these will thrive here. There's sunshine, there will be more when I've done my winter pruning. They're sheltered, so they won't get too bashed by the wind and the rain. And of course, they've got marvellous white flowers that will look great with the other white flowers in the writing garden. And the great thing about colchicums is they are a marker of the season. They say autumn. Now, one of the celebrations of late summer, August, for me, are gladioli. They're a plant that I find works well by using the richness and the diversity of their colour range in borders. But we went to visit a grower who grows them on their own, by the hundred. And he's a champion gladioli grower.
It's having that colour and brightness in my life that gladioli can provide that is the attraction. There's little tiny ones that are 1.5 inches across. There are the big beauties that are 8 inches across. Every colour you can imagine. Dark purples, dark reds, it's pure white. So you've got everything that you could really want. I've been growing gladioli now for close on 30 years. The buzz for me is actually growing them to the best of my ability and to the best of the flower's ability. I think the first large show I did, I went to Harrogate, and then that's when things really started taking off. To be comfortable, they need a light sandy soil, really. They also need quite a bit of water because one of the criteria we're looking for is the amount of buds on the actual flower spike. The perfect show flower will have a nice proportion of open flowers and flowers in bud and be a sort of nice teardrop sort of shape. And a little trick of the trade to sort of try and achieve that, you can actually get a little piece of cotton wool and just pop it behind the floret and position it so that it faces the right way. And to actually accentuate the size of the flower, you can actually pop some into the centre there. Do it very gently in the warmth of the day. Don't do it in the early hours of the morning because the petals will crack and it'll break and that will be the flower ruin. Just spreads the petals out, gets some good size onto the actual open floret. Leave it there for a couple of hours, take it out, and then it will actually stay in that new position and form part of what will hopefully be a championship bloom. Years ago, we were always told that gladioli weren't hardy and you should dig them out every winter. For the show grower, that is still the case. They dig them out every winter, but you can actually leave your gladioli in the ground and you might get one bad winter where they may sort of get hit, but the rest of the time they should come up year after year. This one's Andy O. This is a small flowered variety. It's a personal favourite. I've been growing it for about 20 years. It's not very widespread at all. And one of the reasons for that is it's quite prone to diseases and viruses, and for every 5 you plant, you may end up losing 2 or 3 throughout the season. So in a way, it's like a personal conservation project. I like to keep it going. And on top of that, it really riles one of my rivals when I've got this one. The world of gladioli showing can get very competitive, but those rivals are some of my best friends. We meet up probably every weekend during the summer months. We like to see a good flower, whether it's our own or somebody else's. Over a year, I grow 500 plants in the allotment, but I've also got a small stash on my next-door neighbour's garden, a chap called Reg. Everybody should have a Reg. He's kind enough to let me grow my Primulinus types on his garden. They're little beauties, really, and they're probably the closest thing to what exists in the wild. I like them, A, because they're so different to the big blousy ones, but they're a type of flower that really has disappeared out of commercial use now, and they've been kept going by hybridists. So I sort of half grow them just to keep them ticking over and keep them going so that they're still there. There's 2 secrets to growing gladioli successfully at a national level, and one is TLC, tender loving care. You need to put the time and effort in. And the second one is a very, very understanding family. They know it sort of makes me happy, and I suppose that rubs off on the rest of the family as well.
Seeing Nigel's gladioli in their rows with their intense colour reminds me, actually I'd forgotten this for years, that my mother used to grow gladioli as cut flowers. And they were always grown in the vegetable garden, each with a single stake, in rows, and then cut in these sprays that used to be brought in. And what's the matter? Oh, the ball's in here, sorry. Well, it's over here, Nigel. Look, there. Good boy. Now, gladioli must have sunshine. And one of the most common problems, the most common letters we get here is the lack of sun, shade. What do you grow in deep shade? I've got a few letters here, and these are just a small representation. I've got a small patch of garden, approximately 2 foot by 3 foot long, at the side of my house. And it's in shade for most of the year, except in high summer. I feel I'm not using it to full potential. Can you tell me what to grow there? And that's Jane Shepherd. And I've got a spruce tree in my garden which has a protection order on it, and underneath is total shade. Can you help, please? Well, yes, I can. Because we have exactly this problem here at Longmeadow. This area, which is called rather grandly the Lime Walk, and that's just simply because of the lime trees that I put in there. And we had tulips here in spring, and then in summer it was followed by, tended to be bedding plants, but for the last 3-4 years, it's got shadier and shadier, and nothing really thrives. I mean, you can see, this is it, high summer. This is the display. I want to restore it so it looks really good. But to do that, I've got to grow something that will thrive in dry shade. Ferns are the answer. And what I've decided to do is completely change the feel of this part of the garden. Now, this is not something to do lightly. I've thought about this for ages. The Lime Walk is becoming Fern Alley. And I've chosen 2 particular ferns. So we have Dryopteris felix mass, and then the very similar, but subtly different, Dryopteris affinis. In terms of growing, affinis will tolerate more light. Dryopteris felix mass you can grow in almost total shade. And both will grow about twice the height of that. So they get up to about 3 foot tall. And the reason why I've chosen this and the other Dryopteris is because they're so architectural. And with the fronds creating their shuttlecock shape and catching the light, this will look fantastic. This is an opportunity rather than a problem. The border is very narrow. The hedge has grown out, the lime trees have grown, the roots are sucking up all the moisture. And of course, if you have only a small area with 2 foot by 3 foot, you could fill it with ferns. Now, there's no need to feed it, no need to add any compost. If your soil is very heavy clay, then maybe adding a bit of leaf mould will help, just to lighten the root run and increase the drainage. And remember to water them in. And if they look particularly dry, until next spring, just give them another water. Now, these plants are not evergreen, so that they will die back and get a bit ragged. Ferns always get a bit beaten about by the weather, but then they can be tidied up, and of course the new fronds will appear in spring. And what I realise this is doing is it's changing part of this garden. It's becoming something else, and I think that's exciting. And it's all part of the fact that ferns are not second-class citizens. They're strong, beautiful plants and should be celebrated as such. And of course, the perfect answer to what seems like a really tricky part of the garden. Now, you might not be planting ferns this weekend, but here are some other things you can be doing.
Unlike red currants, which are best pruned in spring, I like to prune black currants immediately after fruiting, and certainly by the end of summer. The idea is to prune out the oldest growth, cutting right down to the ground, which leaves more room for the first and second year shoots that will bear the most fruit next year. Spring cabbage needs to be sown as soon as possible if it's to stand any chance of growing into healthy young plants. Sow them thinly into a seed tray or individual plugs and put them somewhere warm to germinate. They can then be potted on before transplanting to their final position later in October.
Coming? Come on.
Another job that is small but well worth doing is to deadhead buddleias. This not only improves the appearance of the plant, but also encourages a second flush of flowers, which will provide an important source of nectar for bees and butterflies.
The jewel garden really comes into its own at this time of year. At the end of summer, all the colours are richer and more intense, and that's partly through the choice of plants, whether it be the dahlias and the cannas, buddleias and the crocosmia. These all intrinsically have rich colours, but it's also to do with the light, because the light at the end of August and throughout September is lower, and it picks up the velvety richness of these tones. And it is important when you're planning the colour scheme of a garden to think the light that hits it is going to affect it just as much as the choice of colour itself. Now, talking about brightness and colour, there's scarcely a colour at any time of year in any kind of garden that is brighter than the Crocosmia lucifer. And down at Glebe Cottage, Carol is celebrating Crocosmia in all its glory.
As summer progresses, the garden develops. Everything becomes richer, fuller, riper. The soft pastels of June and early July are replaced by fiery reds, sizzling oranges and brilliant yellows. Crocosmias have arrived. Crocosmias come from South Africa, and they just remind us of the debt our gardens owe to plants gathered from all over the world. This is Crocosmia Gerbe d'Or, sometimes called Colleton fishacre. Just look at these glowing golden flowers and these beautiful bronzy leaves. If you rub the leaves, they smell of saffron, and that's where Crocosmias get their name, from krokos, the Greek for saffron. They have this wonderful wandering habit. It's very gentle, but it fits in perfectly with a naturalistic approach. They just want to be themselves, but how could you resist growing something like that? That's Emily Mackenzie. Perfection. Mark Wash has been captivated by Crocosmia for almost 15 years. He's been collecting, growing and hybridising new varieties at his nursery in Cornwall and made frequent trips to see the species growing wild in South Africa. What did you feel like the very first time you saw a Crocosmia?
Well, I had a shiver down my spine when I saw them, after growing them for so many years in my own garden, and then finally going and seeing them out in the wild. Nothing better, nothing better.
Have you brought any of them back with you?
Seed has been sent for me. I go to photograph them,
Yeah.
and then later on, of course, the seed comes. So maybe a year or two later, then some seed will arrive, and a few years after that, you'll get them into flower.
There's one Crocosmia in particular that's got a bit of a bad reputation, though, isn't there?
You'll be talking about Montbretia, won't you? Or the common name, yeah. Yeah, that one's... it was bred back in the late 19th century by a chap called Victor Lemain, and he's down in Nancy in France, and he brought together these two here. This one here is one called Potsii, with its pretty little tubular flowers. Doesn't even look like a Crocosmia,
so
really.
So dainty, isn't it?
Beautiful little thing.
So somebody collected this
Somebody
and sent
collected
it to
that, yes, they did. And then the cross was made with this one, which is a wide, different flower, very different flower. This lives in the forests of South Africa.
So graceful. Is this Aurea?
This is Aurea, this one, yeah.
So what did each of them contribute to Montbretia?
Well, you know, this one is an incredibly vigorous plant, and that's what brought the vigour into Montbretia. But this one brought the beautiful large flowers, and it was the combination of the two that created what we know today.
Yeah. So as much as Montbretia is notorious, I suppose the most famous Crocosmia is Lucifer.
Oh, it certainly is. And if you see any other crocosmia in somebody's garden, then it's sure to be those bright, fiery red flowers of Lucifer standing at the back of the border.
So what are its parents?
Well, you know, they came from two different species in the wild. One of them was this one here. This is paniculata. Sometimes it's golden, or sometimes it's red, like this one here. But both of them always have these sort of burnt ember-type buds, and also these elegant flowers, very different to the others we've looked at. And those flowers are shaped just the same shape as the beak, as the malachite sunbird, which flutters around them and pollinates them. It's a wonderful sight to see.
Yeah.
The other parent that created Lucifer was this one here, and this is Masoniorum. But just look at the shape of the flowers. This time, you've got a long, arching stem with up to 30 buds on there, just a gorgeous plant ready to grow in the garden.
And all opening in succession from the base down. If you really want your crocosmias to perform, then it's essential to carry out a very simple operation every couple of years. Crocosmias make chains of corms. The new one builds on top of the old one. Now, you'd do this in March, so there wouldn't be any shoots there, but the corms, on the other hand, would be big and fat and raring to go. Here are the old corms, probably 2 years old, 3 years old. On top of that, a new one was made that produced last year's flower, and all you do is literally snap that top one off. Dig your hole, make sure it's full of good compost, sink the corm in, cover it over, and plant them just a few inches apart so you get this lovely natural flowing effect. Crocosmias have evolved for thousands and thousands of years in their native South Africa, and they bring brilliant colour to the late summer border. Just when you think it's all over, they say it's just getting going.
This is the best time of year to take cuttings. That's because plants have put on new growth that's got lots of energy. They've hardened off enough so that they don't just wither and die within minutes, but they've got enough freshness in them to react, if they're put in the right conditions, to produce roots. And what's good about taking cuttings now is that they will root, and then you can store quite small plants over winter, ready for growing next spring. Whereas on plants like pelargoniums, storing them in any quantity can take up a lot of space. Now, the secret of taking pelargonium cuttings is to take your cutting as near to the growing tip as possible. There's no virtue. If you have this is Lady Plymouth, one of the scented leaf pelargoniums, and just for your benefit, you have to believe me on this, that smells wonderfully fragrant. Fantastically lemony, musky, fabulous. And if I took a cutting, this is new material here, right down to there, I'd have a big cutting, but it wouldn't necessarily give me a bigger plant. What we're looking for is new, non-flowering growth, and as near to the top of the growth as possible. So if I just snip this off there, like that. And if I left it like that, there's an awful lot of leaf, and that's going to lose moisture. So I need to reduce the amount of leaf to give it a fighting chance until it's produced roots, which then can feed moisture back into the plant. So as ever, with a sharp knife, I'm going to take that leaf off there, and this one off here. Now that's fine. We've got plenty of foliage to feed it, but not so much to stress it and strain it before it's got roots. Now the compost mix for any cuttings wants to be very free draining. What I've mixed up here is some compost mixed with grit and vermiculite. Take a pencil and pop that in the edge there like that. And I would expect that to root. Now, if I take another cutting from here, like that, and there, and there. And I'm just going to cut this below the leaf node. Now, in my experience, that will take easily. However, I have been told that to boost the striking rate and also the root growth of pelargonium cuttings, you can use vitamin C. And all you do is take a vitamin C tablet, the type of which you can buy almost anywhere, pop it in some water, so it dissolves, and then dip your cutting into the water. What I'm going to do is do one whole pot of identical cuttings that have used vitamin C and one pot that hasn't. We'll monitor them and see which one grows better plants. This pot, they've been dipped in vitamin C. This pot, they haven't had anything at all. We'll see. Now, I shall water those, but put them somewhere warm and dry, because it's important to keep the roots moist, as and when they form, but the leaves dry. So don't put them in a polythene bag or a mist propagator if you've got one. And then when you see new growth, we can think about pricking them out and growing them on. But that's it for today. I'll see you here at Longmeadow next time. Till then, bye-bye. Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. And of course, here at Longmeadow, this is the season of fruitfulness. There are fabulous flowers to pick, seeds to gather, and of course, delicious things to eat. This week, Carol is in the hedgerows gathering blackberries, as well as visiting a garden with over 200 different varieties of cultivated bramble.
At this time of year, what we celebrate them for most of all is this bountiful harvest of beautiful berries.
And we visit a prize-winning vegetable grower in Yorkshire to see what it takes to be a champion.
It's very competitive. When you get to the bigger shows, they all want to win, and they're out to win.
Now you can get those. Mind out. That's a good boy. This time of year, the apples are starting to ripen. The earliest ones were already a couple of weeks ago. My orchard, most of them ripen in October. As you can see, we've got lots of windfalls, particularly from this tree, which only crops every other year and then tends to drop its fruit in a great sort of collapse. I never really know what to do with them, because the fact that it hits the ground inevitably, especially on a September floor, means that it's bruised. And you cannot store bruised fruit. Don't even try. It will not last. You can eat them, of course. They taste perfectly good, but you might have to cut out the bruised bits. And what I thought I'd do this year, because I've got so many, is as well as eat them, I thought I'd juice them too.
The first fruit to fall have often been damaged by insects and are too small and unripe to make good juice. What I'm looking for are ripe fruit that wouldn't otherwise store but will make fabulous juice. Apples don't ripen all at once on a tree, but when ripe fruit starts to fall, it's a sure sign that the process has begun. And you should check regularly to pick the fruit whilst it's ripe but still hanging on the branches before they all fall and get damaged.
Now, when you've got your windfalls, they're going to be dirty, bruised, probably covered in Nigel slobber, so it's worth washing them. And I've got a bucket here with a little bit of vinegar in. And just wash them off. Chuck some in. They can float. We can bob for those later. And then quarter them. And the idea when making any apple juice is to pulp the flesh before you squeeze it. So you don't put a whole apple in. And because they're windfalls, there may well be bits you want to cut out. If you don't like that, just take out the really worst of the brown bits. And that does mean that you've got a chance of salvaging as much as possible. And what you take out can go on the compost heap. And then put them in some sort of device that will crunch them up. I've hired this apple press from a community orchard. And it only costs 30 quid a day, which seems to be very reasonable if you've got enough apples to put through it, or if a group of you get together and get all your windfalls and make some juice. But you could use a normal juicer. Anything that will crunch the apples up, and then you compress it. This is exactly the same system that cider is made by. And then you take the hopper off. We're going to lift that off like that. Put that to one side. And you have a muslin inside the container. Press round. It's nice having a contraption. And then just screw down onto it. That's the last drop squeezed out. And there's the juice. Now, it's rich, it's amber-coloured, it's not been filtered or sieved. It's not been pasteurised, so it won't last more than a day or so, but completely fresh. And it's turned what was going to be a waste product, fairly manky windfall and apples, into fresh apple juice. Whether it's delicious apple juice, I don't know yet. Let's try. Quite tart, but nice, really fresh. Less sweet than you'd normally buy, but very, very refreshing. And I suspect the tartness is because they're not fully ripe. But lovely. That's really good. And you know, I've not made juice from windfalls at this time of year before, but I certainly shall continue to do so. Now, obviously, one of the great puddings of all time is blackberry and apple pie. I've got the apple, and Carol has taken to the hedgerows to find the blackberry.
There's a different smell in the September air. It's the smell of ripening fruit, and as you walk along the hedgerows, they abound with all sorts of glory. But nothing more wonderful than the blackberry, Rubus fruticosus. The blackberry's been foraged for generations. And we've all got our own tales to tell of how we gathered blackberries with our grandmas, with our children, filling your baskets, coming home with fingers stained, battle scarred. When we harvest these wonderful fruits, though, we're not the first creatures to have enjoyed them. Long before these fruits ripen, the beautiful pink flowers which precede the fruit have been a source of pollen and nectar. This is a wild plant, but just down the lane from here is a man who's invited hundreds of rubus into his garden. Barry Clark's garden in Hampshire is home to an astonishing 200 different varieties of rubus. And it's a rather obscure sort of group of plants to get interested in. How did you get hooked?
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird story, really. When I was a child, I was particularly interested in stick insects. And of course, stick insects feed on brambles, or many of them feed on brambles. And I was sort of fed up of getting thorns in me all the time. So I went to the local garden centre. I saw that they had thornless variety there. So I was fascinated by that, and then I saw they had other varieties, and I just got sort of hooked on them, really.
So was this the sort of thing that you saw?
Yeah, similar to this. This is one you can still get in the garden centres today. It's the Oregon thornless.
I suppose if you feel it. Yeah, completely smooth. Can I have a taste of that?
Oh, yeah,
Do you mind?
please help yourself.
Where shall I go? It's delicious. Big pips, but lovely flavour. I'm not going to try the leaves, though. The whole place is just packed with these things, isn't it? This is magnificent. That's beautiful.
This is Rubus biflorus. It's commonly called a ghost bramble.
You can see why.
Yes. In the winter, it loses all its leaves, and that's when it stands out the most. And then in the spring, as soon as you finish with it, you chop it right back, and then it will start growing again.
And this is out of this world. Isn't that splendid? And all covered in these beautiful sort of red hairs. I used to be a redhead.
Yeah, they do reckon that these tiny little hairs make the plant slightly carnivorous, as they're quite sticky, if you probably felt, and small flies and that will get caught in those, and the plant gradually ingests the nutrients from the dead bodies.
So do you actually eat the berries from your own plants?
I do. The best time to eat the berries is when they're going very translucent. Yeah. When they go like that, then they're perfect for eating, and that's when they're very sweet.
Clambering all over the place are resplendent rubus. Things like golden veil that could be snaking around Sleeping Beauty's castle. Or the elegant green foliage of lineatus with his chestnut-like leaves. I mean, you'd never imagine that this was a rubus.
This is Taiwanacolis from Taiwan. It's an alpine species, grows right up at the top of the mountains. And you can grow this even in a brick wall. It needs very little soil at all. Right. It's a sweet little rockery plant. The whole genus is really tough, and they'll bounce back from a good pruning.
Right.
They're very tolerant of shade and light, of dry soils and wet soils. Yes, they're very good plants.
And not too fussy about alkalinity or...
No, not massively. No, really. They'll almost grow anywhere.
Yeah. As well as collecting rubus and growing them to perfection in his garden, Barry's also really keen on propagating and making more. Sometimes he uses seed, sometimes cuttings, or he exploits something that the bramble does brilliantly well, is send their shoots forward, push the tips into the ground and take root. All you do, a pot of compost, or you can do it straight into the ground, and you just dip the tip of the plant into the compost, because all rubus have their hormones the other way around from ordinary plants, and all that power to root is concentrated in the tip of the shoot. So just put a staple in it, then it doesn't get knocked around. Put it to one side, water it well, and wait. It's absolutely magic. It's such a simple way of propagating. Here's one that Barry did earlier of the same plant. You can see here the bit of shoot that's been severed from the parent plant. And if you tip it out, look at that for a belting root system. Really good and raring to go. I've been astonished to see the huge variety in leaf shape, form, the way these different rubus grow. You can just glory in their exuberance. But I suppose at this time of year, what we celebrate them for most of all is this bountiful harvest, this wonderful crop of beautiful berries.
I love the ornamental brambles and grow Rubus coburnianus golden veil here in the jewel garden. But just one word of warning, that as Carol points out, it does layer terribly easily. So everywhere these branches come down and touch the ground, they layer and make a new plant. and they can really quickly invade an area, and they're very spiny. So what I do is leave them over winter. They look beautiful. And then in March, pull up all but 1 or 2 plants that have layered themselves and then cut everything down to the ground. And that way they reproduce and they don't take over. But give it an inch and it will always take a mile. One of the aspects of autumn is everything is fading with great delight. But actually, at your garden, the opposite seems to happen. You get a sort of intensifying of colour, as though there's a last burst of energy, which, if you manage it right, just keeps going for week after week as long as the weather stays reasonably good. The reason why the colour in the dual garden at this time of year is so dependent upon the weather is that the plants that have got the most intense colours tend to come from near the equator. And the truth is, they don't know that winter's coming. As long as it stays warm, they'll go on flowering. And they would flower all the year round if they could. It's the first frost that will stop it and literally nip it in the bud. Now, to keep that colour going, as long as it remains reasonably warm, you do need to keep deadheading, and that will promote more flowers. But at this time of year, what I like to do is to deadhead really quite early on as the flower fades and keep those as cut flowers for the house. So if you take a dahlia like this, here you can see there's one that's getting a little bit faded around the edge. So if I cut that, that will promote new growth, but will look fine in a vase. And in fact, I can even have 1 or 2 that are slightly less good than that. Here we've got fading petals. It's a bit rough, but if I cut that off, and this one here, go right down, and the same applies to any of these plants that come from near the equator. So Cosmos atrosanguineus. I can cut 1 or 2, and there are masses of buds here. You can see waiting to flower. And if I take out some of the older flowers, that's going to stimulate and encourage them. I've got zinnias here. Looking a little rough, it's a little sad. I suppose the point about this is a harvest that is private. You wouldn't necessarily give this to somebody because none of them are perfect, and it might look a little bit raggedy. But put this in your house, put it by your bed or put it in the kitchen, and it's a joy. And you can really get the full benefit of what you're growing, both outside and inside, and know that at the same time, you're actually stimulating even more flowers. That's a nice little cucumber. They've been fantastic this year. We've had dozens, scores of them. And by the way, I know this is ready to eat because the end is rounding, which means it's filled out. Whereas I've got another one here, which is about the same sort of size, and you can see it's got a distinctly pointy end, and that needs to grow into its full shape. And these are all the same variety. It's Market More. And they've been delicious. It's been a really good cucumber year. Now, I grow them at this end of the greenhouse, screened off from the rest, because there's more humidity. With the mist propagator, the air in here never really dries out, and they love that, and it's a bit hotter. So if you're growing cucumbers with tomatoes, there's a bit of a conflict, because tomatoes need more ventilation, and actually a bit less heat, too, to thrive. So a good tip is just get some bubble wrap and screen off a corner of the greenhouse. Now, I grow these for taste. I don't mind how big they are, whether they're crooked. All I want is a delicious fruit. But a lot of growers grow cucumbers and a whole range of vegetables for competitive reasons, and they want them perfect every time. and we went to meet a champion grower as he prepares for the Harrogate Autumn Show, which is the biggest show of the year.
I'm David Peel, and at the moment I'm the national cauliflower champion. The year before I was French bean national champion, and also I won at the Harrogate the national potato championships for the last 2 years. We're preparing in a minute for the Harrogate show. That's a very important show because that's the national championships. So to win them means you're the national champion of the British Isles, really. So that's the ultimate what you're aiming to be. When we cut the peas, what we need for the show, we can put them on top of the nettles, which saves the bloom from rubbing off. The bloom is like a powder what's on top of your pea pod, and you need to have that on for showing rather than polished. Yeah, we'll get stung now and again, but it's worth the pain if you see that red card at end of the day. We're looking for a full set of peas in a pod, hopefully one with 10 or 12 in. So what I would normally do, when they're just starting to grow, hold them up to light, count the peas in the pod, and then I can mark them up with a bit of string, how many's got 12 in and how many's got 11 in with different coloured strings. When it comes to judge your pea pod, what I would do is you would split your pea open. This should have had 11 peas in. It's only got 10 in and one small one. So, unfortunately, if you'd have exhibited that, this will be the end of your show and you would have no prize. Dedication. It all started when my wife got an allotment.
Took 92 bags of weeds to the tip, and there was just a little bit more digging just left to do that we couldn't get through, and David decided he'd come down and give us a hand. And that was it. He got hooked and took over, basically. And
in my defence, there were about a quarter of this allotment dug over when I came down, and I dug loads of it over, and out of them 92 bags, I probably filled about 80 of them with old weed.
You so didn't.
We'll have to agree to differ on that one, I think.
David's definitely more the vegetables. He does more vegetables than me. The flowers are more my passion, really.
It is quite competitive, yeah. Well, it is very competitive. When you get to the larger shows, especially, because you've got everybody who, when you get to the bigger shows, they all want to win, and they're out to win. Well, the first time when we entered the national, which were at Llangollen, we entered 15 French beans.
Because we went thinking any prize, any card would be a bonus.
We came back and the first thing we saw when we walked down the steps was this red prize card on those French beans, which we're absolutely elated with.
I think everybody in the tent heard me screaming. I think I threw my arms around the judge and kissed him. I was just so proud of him because, you know, I know how much work goes into it. And I just thought, he's done it. First ever national, and he's won a first.
From then on, we just wanted to enter those sort of competitions because it was the ultimate and you were actually winning the best in the country. When I clean for Harrogate show, I'll be cleaning 30 to 40 potatoes, and it could take me 3 to 4 hours. What you've also got to be careful of when you're doing it is that you don't skin the potato and take some of the skin off your potato. Gently rub across it, very slowly, and it'll remove that piece of muck out of the eye, like such. I'm just tying the cauliflower leaves round together to stop the light getting onto the cauliflower, the small cauliflower, and that way then it keeps your cauliflower white, and you don't get a yellow cauliflower or any blemishes on it. And for showing purposes, keeping them white is paramount. After I've planted them, 3 weeks later, I generally put a nitrogen feed round them, which makes the leaf grow a lot bigger and gives you a better cauliflower because it's the leaf what produces your fruit at the end of the day. What we're looking for in this cauliflower is roughly 7 inch across the curd, a nice smooth dome, and no major bumps, and just have it nice and smooth across. Right, there we have a collection of vegetables. And all that and the local show will probably get you a first prize of £2.
Sometimes I can be down here with the sweet peas and David can be at the top with his runner beans, and an hour can go past and we haven't even spoken, but it's lovely, it's peaceful. You're out in the fresh air, it's free, what could be better? Good hobby. Then you can eat it.
After it's won.
After it's won.
It's amazing, the detail and the care that people put in to growing these champion veg. Well, none of my fruit or vegetables are remotely champion, but most of them are delicious. And with sweet corn, what you're after is that delicious sweetness. If you get them too early, the sugars haven't developed. If it's too late, the sugars turn to starch and they get mealy. And the easiest way to tell if they're ready is from the beard. You can see that this is hanging down and it's dark. And that means that it's ready, whereas this one here is still pale and the sugars haven't developed. If it's withered away completely, the sugars will have turned to starch. So that's ready for picking, and they're very easy to take. You just pull them off like that. And if I open it out, I hope it's looking good. You see, it's not very big, but looks great, and I know will taste good. Now, the really important thing with sweet corn is to cut the time between harvest and eating to as short as possible. So I don't pick them normally until the water is boiling, and then straight from the garden into the kitchen, put them in the water. When they're ready, eat them, and they're fantastic. Now, you may not grow sweet corn, but here are some other jobs you can be doing this weekend. It would be lovely to have fresh mint all the year round, but it does die back in autumn. However, if you dig up a section of plant now, pot it up into fresh compost and water it well, and put it into a warm, sunny place like a windowsill or a greenhouse, you can extend its harvesting season well into autumn. Climbing beans are rapidly going to seed. However, they still make a great harvest. Leave the green pods to dry on the plant, but pick the brown ones as soon as they've dried off. And these can either be husked later or take the beans out now to store. They'll provide seed for next year's crop and also a delicious ingredient that will keep for months and months.
And oh, by golly, I'm feeling dimply. By golly, I'm feeling ribbly. By golly, I'm feeling dimply now.
It's time to start planting garlic, and it's best to begin with either elephant garlic or hardneck garlic. Both these types benefit from a long growing season. Plant them at least twice their own depth, which in the case of elephant garlic is quite a big hole, and be generous with your spacing. They should have a sunny position with well-drained soil. And then once they're in the ground, you can more or less leave them and they'll be ready to harvest around the middle of next summer. There are still lots of salad leaves, and I like to try and have a fresh salad every single day for as long as possible. But you don't have to just stick to lettuce. You can decorate them with edible flowers. Now, some taste as you might expect. Chive flowers, for example, taste exactly of chives. Nasturtiums are famously peppery. Some, like these pinks, to be honest, don't taste of much at all. But they look great, and it just adds a touch of celebration to a salad. To add a few petals, make it look pretty. A surprising number of garden flowers are edible. In the cottage garden alone, I have these pinks, as well as calendula, courgette flowers, and sunflowers. Well, that's it for today, and I'll see you back here at Longmeadow next week. Bye-bye.